Hey, Gaddies, we are super excited today. We have Tom Pyun, the author of Something Close to Nothing, which is a novel about some gays who decide to become gay dads, become some Gaddies. Tom, we're so happy you're here.
Thank you, David. Good to be here. Good to be on your Gaddy's Instagram podcast.
Yeah, well, those might be some longer term dreams. All right, let's start at the beginning. I had never read a novel about some gays who wanted to become gay dads. Can you tell me a little bit about what was the inspiration?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is I started writing the novel almost 10 years ago, so in 2015 in the summer. And at that time, I wanted to capture what was going on in my life. So at the time, I was running my own kind of solo consulting firm that catered to the nonprofit philanthropic sectors, working a lot of hours. And then I've also got really into hip hop dance. And so simultaneously, I had a couple friends or acquaintances just coming home with children. And I was like, wow, out of nowhere, like they never really talked about it. Like, oh, we want to have kids, we want to start a family. It just was kind of the surprise. At least it
Oh,
seemed like a
wow.
surprise to me on social
Okay.
media. And then when I met the kids, and I was like, wow, how did this happen? And then you find out it's surrogacy, and then I got very interested in that. And um, I think that the genesis of the novel really is like about capturing my life back in 2015, which is actually super different now. A lot's happened in the world since then,
Hmm.
but I really felt like um, gay fiction specifically didn't capture or wasn't capturing or hadn't captured yet, what I was experiencing as a 30-something gay man in San Francisco. So
Hmm.
I thought, hey, I think there's room for this.
Yeah, what that's actually, I think that resonates a lot because the idea behind Gaddy sort of fits into that, right? Of hey, there's this group out there, and no one speaking to them, and no one sort of reflecting their stories or the reality that they're
Yeah.
that they're living. Yeah, so love it. Um, okay, let's talk about research for the book because you're not a parent. You learned what that process was like. And I'll say, as a reader, even though my experience was nothing like what happened in the book, it was so fascinating. You get very into detail, you get very into specifics. So tell me a little bit about what the research process looked like.
So I guess the research process was two parts. First, I interviewed two couples. One of them I knew already. One of them was a friend. We're friends with the initial couple about their surrogacy process. And um, the first couple went to Thailand to have it to
Mm.
hire a surrogate, and they provided a really detailed account. And I was taking furious notes, and we spoke for probably an hour or two about their experience. And they ended up having twins, a boy and a girl.
Mm.
The other couple, which lived across the bridge in Berkeley, um, they had a surrogate in California. They had a very cute boy, and I had lunch with them and learned all about their process. And they were just incredibly open with me, and also were excited that someone cared at some level
Yeah.
about this. And they kept on asking, "Is this something that you want to do? Do you want to have a kid?" And I'm like, I don't know, but it's really for this book. And so that's the first part of the research, was doing these interviews. And I'm a social scientist by training. I was a management consultant, so I did a lot of interviews with that. So I'm pretty experienced interviewer, and I think that really helped. So I took all those tons of notes, and then I put them aside. And then I also flew to Cambodia because I knew I wanted the novel to partially take place in Cambodia with a Cambodian surrogate.
Mm.
And I flew there and I stayed there for about close to a month, like researching surrogacy. However, the first day I was there, or the first week I was there, the country outlawed surrogacy.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, this is like, and I'm a little like hippie woo woo California at heart. So I was like, this means something. This is the universe telling me something, kind of sort of like tongue in cheek, and thinking, how do I integrate this potentially into the novel? And
Hmm.
so, but being in Cambodia really helped me, develop those scenes that take place in Cambodia too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that was a research piece. I didn't do as much research as you think one would do for a novel. A lot of the novel writing process really is creative and thinking
Yeah.
about how to like plan the plot and make it all intertwine and the characters kind of fit in.
Yeah,
with
I
all
mean,
that.
much like becoming a gay parent, there's not a script or a playbook to follow, right? You put
Exactly.
those pieces together. I'm curious to
Yeah.
follow up on something you said. If you could remember back to maybe where your mind was around, here's what I think this process means before you started the research, and then after talking to those couples, and specifically those 30 days in Cambodia, how did that evolve, and how did that influence what ended up in the book?
Well, the initial interviews were right when I started. When I wrote the first chapter, basically, I started the interviews, and so it was very early in the process. And part of me thought I was going to be a little bit more, I guess, judgmental around the surrogacy process and the bioethics around it. But after meeting them and seeing how happy they were and how like wonderful their families were and were going to be, something shifted in me, and I said, I don't know if I think that's the story. I think it
Mm,
could be. I think talking about it is something I might want to explore, but I don't think that's actually the crux of the story. And then I think second, going to Cambodia made me realize how much, I mean, actually all of it made me realize, hey, for a gay man or gay men to become parents, it has to be very intentional, whether you do surrogacy or adoption, but especially surrogacy, it's quite expensive. It's quite a lengthy process. There's a lot of legal implications, lawyers, health insurance, um, payments, etc. And so um, it's not just like, oh, we got drunk one night on our honeymoon
yeah,
and you know we have a baby
yeah.
9 months later, right? So that really helped me kind of sketch the motivations of the characters and
Mhm.
and the backstories um, and how kind of the kind of the ultimate crisis of the novel, which is
Yeah,
not to give too much away, but that one of the men is a lot more into being a parent than the other.
yeah, and I think that is very relatable. Whether you're starting your family on your own, whether you're starting it with a partner, there are all those different dynamics that all of us, have to work through. So you write the book, it comes out. I want to know, what was the reaction from the community, maybe specifically gay and queer dads that you talked to? What went with what you were expecting? What was different? Give me the truth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the publishing process is so, especially in my case, felt just really treacherous and long. So by the time we got to my book launch, I like all of the excitement was sort of was like deflated for me. I was just like,
Yeah,
oh God, it's relieved. It's like, I mean, this book finally is out in this world, and I started it
sure.
10 years ago, and um, but I did start getting reactions first from like women who were mothers or wanted to be
Mm,
mothers, and then some gay men who are parents tend to be quite busy, so they read it a little later. But I did get a very positive reaction, and it felt like it definitely captured some of their occasional ambivalence around parenthood, but mostly that they're just really happy that to feel represented and to know that this book is out in this world, and hopefully it helps s- gay couples who are thinking about starting families to have open communication and to
yeah.
like ask themselves the right questions and to make sure they really are ready for it.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, sort of in those conversations, were there any moments or particular people that you heard from or talked to that stuck with you?
Not really. I mean, most of it has been over Instagram. I
Mm,
think with some friends, I had one friend who was a woman who was struggled with her own fertility issues, and so she said that it actually helped her process some of her own grief around um, her her pregnancy journey.
mm,
And so I found that really touching and also very surprising. But also, I feel like one couple did mention that do have a child. They did mention that it helped them rethink, the possibility of following their dreams and being a parent, and
mm,
like making sure that they leave room for that, and they're not living entirely through their child, and thinking about their own lives and how to make sure that they're happy. Because if they're happy and they're living their best lives, their child, they'll be a better parent, and their child will
yeah.
inevitably benefit from that.
Definitely the putting your own oxygen mask on first never made sense to me until I become a parent, and then it did.
Really.
I'm actually
Oh.
maybe let's jump back to the publishing process. I'm curious, what was the reaction when you started shopping this book about two men trying to become dads?
I mean, most of the publishers that reject all the publishers that rejected me thought it was a very fresh idea.
Mm,
I think I mean maybe I don't know for sure what happened throughout the first two rounds of submissions to publishers by my agent at the time. But I mean it was in the middle of the pandemic, like peak pandemic, and the industry was really upended, A, and then B, a lot of acquisition editors weren't getting back to the agent, which was just it was a really unprecedented time. And
mhm,
I imagine that a book about gay dads, one of whom was a bit ambivalent, just didn't feel like of the moment at the
yeah.
time. Like I think it was a really unsettling time. Um,
That's
the
actually
public,
quite interesting to hear because I became a parent during that time, right? So
yeah.
there's sort of very much the both sides of it, and I think what your book touches upon, and then we're trying to do here at Gaddies is this realization that gay and queer parents, that's not a new concept, right? But what is new is sort of the growing um, population of those of us able to do it authentically and starting to have these kinds of stories that weren't able to exist before.
Yeah, and what was very important to me in the book is to make sure to portray these gay dads as flawed. I feel like with
Mm,
marginalized communities, especially around of unfortunately contentious issue and politicized issue of being a queer parent or
mm,
LGBTQ parent, um, there is this temptation to portray everyone as ideal, right, and perfect and perfectly fit and happy and ready, and that's an unfair standard to hold to hold anyone up to,
yeah.
right? And so I think that was something that's was something that the publisher struggled with, to be honest, too. They're
Mm,
like, these guys are kind of messed up. And I'm like, that's the point. Gay men do have a lot of trauma, and we have to work out a lot of these things in order to become parents. And parenthood actually tests a lot of those boundaries and a lot of
yeah.
those issues, those deeply held like traumas and pain and childhood pain, because the kid will trigger all that. And so
Mhm.
um that was something that I mean, that was a tension. I think the last tension is the book is I wrote it intentionally to be commercial literature, and there's all these like genres, commercial literary. But it has a real literary darkness to it, and so publishers didn't really know what to do with that kind of that tension between kind of a lighthearted voice with a kind of a shadowy these kind of shadowy-ish characters who are very human and ultimately pretty good people, but human and complicated, and some dark stuff in it too. So um it made it kind of a tough sell, I think, all those factors, and I ended up going with a wonderful independent publisher and had a really positive experience who really got the book. And it's funny, they're kind of old school lesbians, like the women who run this publishing house, and they coined it differently than I pitched it. They said it was about queers who are struggling with like heteronormative standards and that
Yeah.
they hold themselves up to. So, and I never really thought much about that until they sort of this older generation of lesbians sort of saw that as like a major theme in the book, and I was like, wow, that is really cool.
Yeah. Our elders are very wise. And I think
Yes.
you hit upon it, but certainly one of the major pieces is that parents are just people, right? And we are just people who are a mess and trying to not be a mess and trying to not make our kids be a mess. And you sort of have these moments where you're at the park with them and you're like, oh, I'm a parent. I'm not 9 years old anymore, right? Like the
Yeah.
kids are having the kids, and I think the book certainly does an excellent job of portraying people in the fullness of who they are. And I think especially in a world where curation is able to happen and choose what you put out or what you don't put out, it was definitely a message that really stuck.
Oh, thank you, David. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was like, I'm rooting for everyone, but am I? So there was a lot of I had thoughts, and after you read the book, you can get back to us. Um, All right, Tom. Well, your book is available on the Gaddies Bookshop website that we'll link here. Tell our listeners where else can they follow you and stay in touch?
Yeah, you can reach me on my Instagram at THP100 at THP100 or on my website, which is Tom Pyun.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm really open to, the folks that feedback or enjoy the book. I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, follow me on the gram or
Yeah.
LinkedIn. You can find me. It's same name, Tom Pyun. There's not that many Tom Pyun. There's like one other in the country.
There you go.
So,
Well,
so yeah.
we'll be clamoring for the sequel.
Thank
And yeah,
you.
again, I think it resonates, and it feels nice to someone say, "I see you," and I'm gonna start telling the story, even if that story isn't direct reflective of what you went to. It's still really powerful.
Great.
Thanks, Tom.